Nick, with that pillow behind your head, it makes you look like you're laying down in bed and you just got some
Yes,
stuff
it really
legs.
does.
It looks like he's in the hospital.
Hasn't been feeling well, so I think that is true.
Yeah, I just went through the hellacious stomach virus, and I'm alive today, but it was debatable for a while. So
I don't blame you for getting comfy then.
I'm happy to.
Got a way to knock him when he's down, Eric.
No problem.
It's a community service, you know.
I hope
Uh,
you feel better soon.
Thank you. Eventually, I'm going to eat solid food again.
Yeah, stomach viruses are no fun.
Do you know how you got sick?
Oh, yes. Yes. One little girl showed up at church on Sunday and threw up when she got there. The entire church came down with it. Everybody there.
He's patient zero.
That's an infectious stomach virus.
Yeah.
Yeah, it went through everybody. And it was the same thing. Like I said, I lost 6 pounds doing this. I don't recommend it as a weight loss program.
I'm in 6 pounds.
6 pounds is 6 pounds, I guess.
Yeah, you earned it.
I earned it. Last night, my wife brought me crackers and Jell-O and a banana, and that seemed like heaven. Gatorade. Oh, stop looking like an invalid.
You're good, man. Don't worry about it. I guess. How'd the lab go? Did you guys complete the lab, or are we still working on it?
Wow, the lack of confidence.
No, that's fine. This is a long one. I'm
For
not
me, it
judging.
is a appropriate lack of confidence.
Yeah, just asking. It's all right.
You guys love React yet?
I'll get back to you on that.
Imagine if we were in
we'll get
Garrett. Imagine if we were in person. How little engagement we get.
Oh,
We
yeah.
just asked them a question. And they're just like stared at us. Like,
That'd be funny. So,
yeah. All right, great.
Everyone turn your labs in unless you messaged me otherwise, please.
Alrighty, we're gonna run through it, and I'm gonna throw information at you. And yeah, if you guys just want to talk about any part of this, or you want to go in depth and I skip over something, just bring it up. I kind of want to answer questions that you guys have. This is a redone version, so I haven't walked through the specific. Luke went in and redid this lab. You can tell this one's a lot more in depth. So apologies if I get hung up on a part, but it should be all right. Make sure you guys are muted. Double check. Remember, we're not muted when we come into the meeting. Okay. So the first part that we're going to go over is starting a React project. So React is like a full library. It kind of runs in the background in the browser. And kind of setting up a React project is more involved than we've been doing so far. There's a lot of setup and stuff that you'd have to do if you wanted to build one from scratch, like we've been doing. It's not just making an HTML file and making a JavaScript file and saying put React in it. There's kind of some process in there because it has to turn the code that we write in React in like JSX and all that. It has to turn that into just plain JavaScript that the browser can read, and that kind of step there. You know, you have to write some configuration and stuff. So create React app is this nice little package that we can just run, and it will create a React application that we can just kind of like a boilerplate is what they would call it. So I'm going to go ahead and start that because it kind of takes a second. So create a new project with create React app. If we want to use that, we're using this npx command, which you guys have installed Node, and we'll get into what Node packages are later. For now, just know that npx create dash react dash app, and then the name of the project that you want to call this one. Here we'll call it reacting to React. It's asking us, okay, if you want to do some stuff. This is kind of y'all's first introduction to like command line tools and stuff. So sometimes you get prompts and it's just loading stuff until it comes back to where I can type again. It's working, and we're going to need to let it complete. It takes, depending on your computer, from 30 seconds to a couple minutes. Whew, gotta sneeze. And this is going in and essentially running a Node package, which again we'll get into later, and setting up like a whole project you guys have seen. Mine usually takes a couple minutes, so we'll wait. Let's see anything. Yeah, I think this one's going to be fun. I need some elevator music. This is good. Good content.
Josh, internet doing its thing.
Yeah, that'd be great. Wait, I'm not lagging, am I? Is it already?
No, you're
already there?
fine. I'm just making a joke to how long it's taking.
I'm traumatized from that. You can't make jokes anymore. No more jokes.
I'm sorry.
Okay, cool. So once it comes back here, it kind of gives you some end of instructions on how to get started. npm start will start the server. So now let's actually just open this up, all the files it created. So we'll just code dot and drag that over. That's everything. Okay, I wanted to point out real quick. So you guys are going to make this mistake. So pay attention here. When you create a React app, like you run this command, you see I ran it in C16. Make sure you guys are muted. Here's somebody. Create React app, this project, there's the little thing that we're running in the command line, creates a folder with the project files in it called whatever you named the project. So don't make a folder and then run create React app inside it. Step one folder out and then run it, because it's going to make a folder for you. And that will cause issues when we try and do stuff. So we'll cd into the project folder, reacting to React, code that. And then we're looking at a boilerplate React project. It's given us some node modules. These are separate packages that the React project uses to do stuff. Public will be the files that we serve to the user whenever we like serve stuff to the browser. And then our source is kind of like the React side before it gets turned into, like I said a minute ago, you have to take the React stuff that you write, like the JSX and everything, like stuff like this. Browser can't read this, so it needs to get turned into the JavaScript. So runs through that step and sends it over to the browser. What else? Yeah, that's fine. Cool. So now we can start. So we're going to start by deleting these two directories and just starting with like basic ones, because create React app starts with some like boilerplate stuff, kind of like a little spinner website. You guys might have seen it in the examples, but we're just going to dump those out because we want just blank everything. And we'll remake those.
Would there be any reason you would keep those? Ever a time that you would keep those?
Not really, because it's a lot of like bloat. It's like stuff specific to their little, like you start it up and they have the little spinner on there. It's not really stuff you need. So the stuff that's in there is like the image for the spinner and the CSS to make it spin. It's not really stuff that you could use. Once you know like what the bare minimum you need to make, you just dump the whole thing out and start from scratch. The thing that we're keeping here is like the node modules, the whole like this package JSON that tells it how to run. You can see in here, we're going to run npm start. That's where that script comes from and all that. So that's the stuff we're keeping. So we're just dumping the public and source directory, starting from scratch on those. New one, and then an index HTML in here. So we'll go public, new file, index.html. Yeah, thought I did it wrong. We'll do the emit stuff. And I'm not going to put any script tags in here. Create React app, it's package JSON and everything, and specifically these React scripts packages that they're running here. They figure out, they look for a public folder with an index HTML, and it will inject the JavaScript in there automatically. We don't need to put a script tag in here. So that's kind of confusing, but once you realize it's like, because the Create React app thing, we bootstrapped that, we don't have to do the script tag in here. That's it. We're going to put a div with ID root in here. And this is where it's going to take our entire application. Remember, we're doing a single page application. So the things that we write in this source directory are going to take up the entire page. And the React, library is going to handle putting things off the page, removing based on state. So it's going to dump everything in there. We'll take a look at that once we get there. And then we can come back over here. We did that. Create a new source directory, components inside a source. We're about to set up this source directory. You can keep this. This could just be one giant file if you wanted. I could just have like a app.js in here like we've been doing. And it could just be like tons of lines with lots of functions and stuff, but it would be confusing. So now we're getting into like importing modules and exporting modules from files. So that's using many files together by exporting things from one file and importing it to another. So that's not specific to React, but it's good for React because it would get confusing quickly. So let's not do that. We'll have a components folder. In here, you can see it does this. This just says like source is empty, but it has a components folder in here. So if I want to like do some stuff, we'll create an index.js right here. And then what else does it want me to do? Let me know if the text is not big enough, I forget. Yeah, and then over here, so index.js is going to be our entry point into where we actually hand off the React project to the HTML to actually be rendered on the actual page. And then we're going to have an app.js as well inside the source directory, capital, just by convention there. And this is going to be, this app.js kind of serves as like the very top level of our application, like our actual application. And then we hand off from the app.js X into the index.js, and the index.js actually handles rendering it. So the index.js is always going to be a very simple file. And the app.js, this thing, when we get there, is going to be the top level of our actual application. Source, create an app.js, write a basic entry point for the index.js. So I am just going to copy these, but we'll go over each line. These 4 lines here are going to be the essential lines. These will pretty much never change throughout the course of the rest of the, course that we're doing. But let's go over these. So import React from React. This just brings React, this thing in scope. You see we're not actually using it anywhere, but it needs to be in scope just because, yeah, that's how modules work. Import React DOM. React DOM is a specific package that actually renders. You can see we're calling that down here, React DOM.render. Render the app components and dump it into the root. So this is the point. This is that handoff point of React giving it over to the actual page. And then we're importing an app component from our app.jsx that we're about to come over and build. So these 4 will pretty much never change. This is just the handoff point. Nothing really too complicated here. You don't need to know at this point how these two work. Just know that you call render and it works magically. Oh, I don't know if you guys, I hope you guys are asking questions. Cool, nice.
So,
Good
like,
question.
I caught a, I'm sorry, I kind of jumped in,
That
but
was
like, I was getting a formatting problem right here, like with the render
Mhm.
app and the, what is that, the backslash?
yeah, like it's rendering
Yeah,
like an
like mine,
HTML tag.
yeah, like mine is like, when I save it, it'll space it out and turn mine red instead of keeping it together where my root and everything is, like it's working. But
Yeah.
once I save it, it changes on me. So
It might be, yeah, like your whatever you're using for formatting, like Prettier or something, it might do some strange stuff with this. We can look in the cover king space and see exactly what's going on, but it's probably, I would just take whatever formatter you have on, like Prettier, and just try and turn that off for now. That'd
okay.
probably fix that. Someone had another question. What's up?
Yeah, I was just asking about the import because Luke made it very clear that you don't need them anymore as much. But he didn't really specify like when you would need them. He just said he just does it because of like habit. So I just didn't know if there was a specific case.
Yeah, I think this import React I talked about, you see how this isn't being used anywhere. Like this needs to be here. If I take this out, this will break. But I think the import React from React, I don't think you actually need that. I think they've reorganized how that library works. And I don't think you actually need this anymore. I still put it in there because I learned from Luke. And so if he's doing it, I'm doing it. And yeah, I just put it in there. But I think like in every React, if we're making a component or anything, this will be up there when I'm doing them. But I think technically you can just remove it. I don't think it needs to be there anymore. Specifically this line. Yeah, good question. All right.
He said basically it was just safe practice.
Yeah, I mean, Create React Apps also is really good with errors, or it's better than most things. So it'll tell you like React needs to be in scope. If you're getting that error, then you need to put this at the top. So if it's, yeah, but you guys can play around with it, put it up there and then remove it and see if it breaks. I think they've fixed that at this point. Cool. Yeah, so this again, that stays the same. And now we're going to come down. We have project structure like this. That's where we're at. And then we're going to get started. All right, React is component based. So each component should be separate into its own file. Start this exercise by typing source. Code a function component named app that returns a simple JSX element inside of it. This is something that Luke is going to like really specify a lot throughout these lectures, is just to get everything set up where you can see the app JSX and the index.js are working together and then expand from there. Don't start setting everything up and then run it. And then like you have to fix like 9 levels of everything. So, keep checking it. Go to the browser, make sure it's all good, and then go keep adding features. Yes, so we're going to come over to our app JSX. Like I said, this app JSX is the top level of the whole application. That's why it's called app. And we're going to build a function component. So that is literally a JavaScript function that we're going to write JSX in. So the basic way I recommend setting up something like this is put this at the top if you want to. If you don't, you're fine. Write your function right here, and then go ahead and go down and just say export default app. We're talking about modules, importing things from files and exporting things from files to be used in other files. This is telling it to export this function so that I can import it right here. Yeah. Cool. And then in here, what he's talking about in this section right here, start with something obvious like an H1, just return something simple from here. Like that. And then just say whatever you want. And then I'm literally going to go run the whole project and we're going to go see if this loads in the browser. When we want to run a Create React App project, just remember it's npm start. We'll get into what npm, npx, all that stuff is once we get to node, and we're doing specifically like node stuff. But just know you're going to run npm start. This is going to run a little server on your computer that we can go to localhost 3000 and actually access that. It opened up in the wrong browser. So come over here, go to localhost 3000. And now we have their stuff.
I have a question.
What's up, man?
In the videos, he wrapped his H1s in a div. Is that necessary?
No.
Okay.
When you want to do multi-line returns, like we're going to need to be, we're not just going to always be returning like one line of HTML. So if you want to return multi-line, just parentheses and then, so that's the same thing right there.
Yeah.
What's the purpose of the fragment?
The fragment. So let's do something like this. If I have two components like this, I just want to render an H1 and H2. But if you hover over, JSX expressions must have one parent element. So it needs just one element with children. It can't have two siblings like this. You can solve that by wrapping in a div, right? So that'll solve it. Error goes away. But what if I don't want an extra div everywhere? I don't need like 900 divs in my page. I have all these components with a div wrapping them. No. So you can just do a fragment, which can look like that. And this will disappear when it actually loads. So if we go and look at the HTML that's loaded, it gets rid of the fragment. The fragment wraps it for, while React is putting it together. But when it puts it on the page, it gets rid of it. So if we check the body, div ID root, and then just two siblings.
Okay, because I was getting that confused because I was like, is that like a separate div or is that like a separate thing entirely?
Yeah, it's just a little fragment tag. I don't know why they need the one parent, thing. I don't know why that is, but this is how you solve that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right.
Did you put styling in those fragments, like bootstrap stuff, or you put it?
I believe that is a negative. You'd have to, if you wanted to style it, I would just do an actual div. And then, yeah, just to be clear, if you do the div, it actually gets put in the page. Div, and stuff. Alrighty. Let's go back, get the fragment. I don't know where I was with that. Let's delete them. Cool. Okay. What next? Start. Right. And then, yeah, just getting familiar with Create React App. Remember, Create React App is not the only way to build a React project, but it's a pretty good way to start. And you can see it'll give you a compiled successfully. If I mess something up and throw an error, it'll try and give me a good error. Create React App is pretty good about showing where your error is. So it's telling me here, so while you're debugging and everything, check your terminal and read the error. Don't just say it's broken. Try and read the error and determining what it's telling you. Check that, line. Usually this is not going to be of much benefit at this point, but yeah, just try and read the error before you ask for help. That's what I'd say. Because knowing how to debug stuff like this is crucial. Yep. So unless you get the compiled successfully or something like this, and it's all green, then it's not going to load. All right. Now we're down to here. All right. Make a new component named greeter inside of the components directory. Have this also be a simple function component that returns a header. It should receive two props, phrase and name, and it needs to take these two props and display them in the returned header of this component, something like phrase. So you wind up with an output in the header, hello there, Luke, for example. Okay, so now we're getting into props. Let's start there. Components in React are supposed to be treated kind of like they are templates, kind of like we did classes a little while ago. And there, you know, a class is kind of a template for an object, and you spit actual information into them. It's the same thing or same concept here, where we're going to write a function component. And again, we're going to do our little setup. So I'm going to build this out, export it, and then just do like a simple render just to make sure it's all tied together. So we'll just start with an H1 with some crap in it. Export default at the bottom. Default greeter. So I'm exporting my greeter component function, get it out of here. We're going to render that. So I'm taking this component, and app.jsx is going to render greeter. So I'm going to import greeter from /components/greeter. Now it's telling me it's defined, but it's never used. If I want to render it, I can come down here and treat greeter as if it is a HTML element, kind of, where I can just come down here and say opening brace greeter like that. Just like app renders here, I'm rendering greeter here. And then we can come back and make sure that that's working. So here's my greeter component. I think they also gave you guys like React Dev Tools. Looks like mine are outdated. Oh yeah, that's right. Oops. If you install this extension, React Developer Tools, you'll have extra stuff in this list over here at the end. So here's components and greeter. I can see the components that are being rendered. You can see app renders greeter, right? And now we want to go in and actually start expanding on greeter a little bit. So I'll give it the multi-line and try and remember what I was doing. All right, so props. We're looking at greeter being rendered inside of app, where greeter is going to be kind of a template, right? So I kind of, if the things that you want to edit in the template are based on like the properties that you pass in when I render it. So if I come over here and I want to pass greeter properties, like those would be like if I was making a class, I would say like a person, and a person has a name, age, whatever. And then when I create an instance like this, I pass it the specific values like Josh 27 or whatever, blah, 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 right? You tell it the properties that it's going to get inside of the argument list of the component up here. So this one, it's going to take a name and something else. Phrase. So say phrase like that. So whenever I render greeter, I'm going to have to pass it properties, just like HTML properties. Render it with the name being Josh. Render it with the phrase being hello there. You can see I'm just passing string literals directly in here, but these could be variables. They could be state values if you, once we get there, or they could be other props because it's just, or, you know, any kind of JavaScript value, array, object, anything could be a prop. In this case, we're just doing strings. The way that you use the props inside is going to be based off a props object that is going to get created for you. And we can do something like this. We just inject values directly in like we've been doing. So curly's like that. Hold on 1 second. All right, what we want to render here, we'll do another H1. And then where I want to inject, because I don't have to do, if I want to inject like these values into this HTML, I want you guys to remember, like, this is not really HTML. This is JSX. If you hover over this, it's a JSX intrinsic element H1. It's a JavaScript representation of HTML. So when you want to inject JavaScript values like variables, you don't have to do like the backtick, whatever. You just do curly braces. And this is me injecting values directly in. All right, so I want to use the property name that I'm passing in. So if I just left this as it is right now, props.name in this case is going to be Josh. So it's going to be an H1 with Josh inside. And then I just want to say, yeah, well, let's actually make it like grammatically make sense. The props, and this props object here, this name, this props is just automatically generated. You don't have to create that. It's already there. It's just going to be there for any component that you make. I don't even know if I made hello there, whatever. You guys know what I'm saying. All right, let's just see what that looks like. I have no idea. Let's put a space. All right. Oh yeah, that's what I did. I'm used to destructuring stuff. Let's just keep it up here. That's what it needs to look like. The way I had it, you can destructure props with like curlies around it like that. And then you just use the single. That makes no sense to you. Let's just do props like I had it. Hello there. So up here, you'll usually see it just like props like that. That works. Come back. And just to show you like it's a template, let's render another one. Someone have a question?
Yeah, so just curious if it makes a difference or what the proper way to do it is, but I set the format for basically the comma in between the phrase and the prop name, and then the exclamation point under the greeter component or whatever it would be.
Just like that.
So yeah, right. So I formatted the sentence there as opposed to where you're doing it.
Yeah, it's fine. As long as you understand how the props get passed down and everything, it's fine however you did it. This might not make sense how I structured it, but just showing you how the props get passed around. But let's do another one with a different name and just like making clear that this is just a template. Greeter is a template. We plug in values. So name, Turner. And Turner's phrase is, I don't know. What's your phrase, Turner? Tell me.
He says that you're lagging a lot.
You guys are really good. That's like I get like a shock. Like, oh no, not again.
That can be Turner's phrase though.
Oh. I'm gonna
I
say
would be grammatically correct with it though. I would put the you are contradiction or contraction there.
Let me see.
For the record, you're not lagging, by the
way. Well, good. I'm glad I'm not lagging. Yeah, please tell me if I am. I'll drive 30 minutes to the office and do a walkthrough from there.
I guess I see the difference there though, because I was wanting to do like what's up name or whatever, but that would be a question mark instead of the exclamation point. So here I can change, you know, it being a statement or a question mark instead of having.
And that's just how you design your component.
Consistent.
Like you're gonna, you have control over how you design it. Like, does it take the exclamation point or is this another property like punctuation? You could do props.punctuation, you know, and pass that in.
I thought about that, but this makes it easier where it doesn't have to be a static exclamation point at the end of every greeter.
Yeah. See, now you're lagging, Turner. All right, cool. So, right, it's just a template. Greeter is a template. We pass in different props, and this gives it flexibility now because now it can take a different name and a different phrase. I could pass a different punctuation mark in if I wanted to, but you're understanding props get passed down when the component is rendered and, you know, plugged in to wherever it should be inside the templates. Cool. Everybody good there? Seems like it. Cool. All right, render 3, cool. Oh, he's done that. He's ahead of the game. Inspect each of the greeters. Oh yeah, then you can come over and inspect each one inside your dev tools. Over here now I have 2 of them and I can observe their props here so you can see what the properties are. And tells you what line they came from the source. So it's super handy. What next? I feel like you guys are getting props and components. Inspect each Different values. Next, we're going to add a controlled React input. Remember that pop quiz from the video's reference. Well, here it is. Add an input element into the return of your app.jsx below the 3 greeter components. Code up a useState hook. Okay, let's start here. We'll go back to app, go down below here and create an input. Just a regular old input. Code up a useState hook inside your app component and call the state's variable username, state variable username, initializing it as a blank string. All right, this is a lot of steps, but this is super important, understanding controlled inputs in React. So like I said, React is optimizing, like we talked about yesterday, it's optimizing page refreshes by observing the values. If it can't observe the values if they're not controlled by React, in this case, an input that's just I type in, it's still going to work. Like I can still go over here and type and stuff, but React doesn't know anything about this. When I'm typing in this box, it's just normal. It's just a normal DOM input. If I want React to be able to control what's happening in this changing, I need to make it a controlled input by using a state value and doing all the stuff we're about to start doing. So I'm sure he went over that in the videos, but controlled inputs are kind of a little bit, it's just a few steps. So code up a useState hook inside your app with a state variable username, initializing it as a blank string. So we want to initialize state, is the things that, or I'm probably saying that grammatically incorrect. State is the things that change throughout the course of someone using your application. So like the text that goes in an input field would be a state value that changes. When we want to use state, there is literally a function called useState, like that, inside the component. So state values belong to a certain component, and they're passed around those values by props. So if I want to initialize a state value, I say const, and then we're doing some array destructuring here. We'll say username, and then we need the state value itself. So we'll call it username, and then we're going to write a function, and React will just automatically create this function, but this is a function to update this state value. We're going to set that equal to useState and pass in the initial value of that state value. So this is initializing a state value. So username is the state value itself. Set username is the function to update that state value. And then you call useState, and this is what username will start as. It's just an empty string. So yeah, console log username right here. And that is an empty string at the start. And then if I call set username, I can update the value of that. And this is controlling the actual information that's the application's using. Cool. So then, man, this is a lot of steps in just one. A lot of concepts in one step here, but cool. App components, initializing a blank string. Do you guys have any questions about initializing a state value like that?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I think Luke called this a destructured array or something like that. Is that right? I hadn't seen that concept before. Could you explain it a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So this useState function call like this with an initial state value returns an array of 2 values. And it returns an array, so it'll be something like this. So whatever I passed in as the initial state will be the first, and then the function that updates that will be the second. This is what this function returns. If I want to take both of these things and just give I want to call this username and I want to call this set username, you can destructure them out. This is me creating a variable called username based on what this useState returned. So yeah, this will be username and this will be set username. So it's me taking the return values from a function that returns an array of values and giving those values a name based on their order.
So it's like the equivalent of establishing a variable that just has those 2 things inside it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's kind of like taking this two things that this returns, like useState always just returns those two things whenever you call it, and I'm immediately giving them a name. So instead of saying like state return, whatever, so saying whatever this returned and then giving it a name like const username equals state return at index 0, and then so that would work too, but it's just a you'll see it, you'll never see it like this. It's always just destructured because it just keeps it to one line.
Okay, I think that makes sense. Is
Feels
this something
better.
that's like unique to React? Can you do
No.
this outside this context?
You can do it outside the context. It's called array destructuring. That's the thing with this. Like we're doing React, but we're also throwing tons of ES6 features at you. So a lot of this is going to be like not specific to React, but it looks like it is. Like even JSX, like we talked about, you could do React without that. There's like React, just like there's document.create element, there's react.create element. And that's essentially what all these are going to become, is like React create element, you know, H1 and all that, but it just makes it so much better with JSX that no one ever does that. Let's keep going. So add the value and on-change attributes to the elements, the input element that we have. So we're back creating this as a controlled inputs. Add the value. So what I'm going to do over here on this input to make it a controlled input, I'm going to tie the value property. Remember, input, whatever its value is whatever is in the box. So as we type, the value is set to that. We're kind of taking that from being automatic in the browser and like controlling it ourselves. Value is tied to username. That's what our input is tied to. So if we just did this, username is set to an empty string, and I've tied the value of the input to that. So now when I go and type in this box, I'm typing, but it doesn't do anything because we're never updating what they've typed in the box, you know, based on we're never updating the state value by what they typed in the box. So that's what we're going to do with this on change. Well, hold on now. Let me see what the instructions are. I don't want to venture away from that. Oh, I could have sworn it's all a use effect in here. Cool. Yeah. So on change. So on change means is a event that gets fired whenever we type in the box. Each time, each event is a different on change event. When we on change, we want to call the updater function set username. So I'll just write an anonymous function like that. Writing the anonymous function so that this set username doesn't get called automatically, like when the page loads. So we'll pass in e set username with e.target.value. So I know this seems like a bunch of unnecessary stuff, but you have to do controlled inputs. Don't show me your code where you're just doing an input with none of this. You have to do this every time. All right, cool. Set username with the value, and this updates. So now we can go back and observe our little input component. And now we're typing. If I check app, it's got a state value. This is our username, state value right here. And as I type, you can see it gets updated. Yeah, this is a controlled inputs. This is how you have to do inputs in React. Just get comfortable with it. Yeah. Any questions on that? Any questions like initializing state, setting the value property, on change?
Can you go over the change?
You said go over the on change again?
Yeah, just like second half, like why did you put the E after the on change in the curly braces?
So there's no difference here between like an on change and So there's no difference between like a React one, and this is just the event object. So if I went in here and console log D, then I can come back over here and type. And it's, you see it's a synthetic base event. Remember, React is running that whole virtual DOM thing. So this is a React event, but it has all the same properties of a normal one, like target.value is whatever's in the box. And so I'm telling it, when I'm doing this on change and all this function here, I'm telling it take whatever's in the box and set it as the state value. And then the state value is used as the value. So I'm kind of wrapping it. We kind of feel like we're doing an unnecessary turn, but it's to let React be in control of what's on the page. All right. Cool. Let's refresh. Any more questions, y'all?
I had one real quick. So for the on change, I think in the video, and basically I guess it's about the same as what we were doing before with events. So it's like with the arrow function you have there, you could put that above the return statement as like a separate function, like give it a name and then call it in the on change. You could do that too.
Yeah.
Okay.
We could say handle. You'll usually see them as like something like this. That's probably better, honestly. Handle username change goals. Oh, this should be like a const. My bad. Just like a normal function that takes the event object and calls set username. So essentially what we had down there, e.target.value. Or I could, maybe be better and just pass it a name and say it's going to set that with that name. Can't type. And then down here, just call like that. And if I'm going to do it with a name, it would have to be something like, so that I can call it and pass it. So that could work too. Oh, yeah, just pass that E. Is that how Luke did it, or did he do it differently? Did he just do it like nothing here?
I think he just put, the handle username change. And then, he went ahead and put the event target in that function.
Yeah, it's fine. Oh, but I broke stuff. Cool.
Cool.
I guess that'd be useful if you're to use that again numerous times.
Yeah, I think also to separate, you don't want to have the return full of a ton of stuff. Keep it as simple as possible and just have all the logic outside. We'll keep that in there. All right, y'all good? Any more questions before we move on? Man, all right, cool. All right, for fun, add a p tag. Will the input have the text? And then we are logging in as username display. All right, cool. So they wants to put a p tag and then render the state value. So just like we rendered prop values directly in here, we can render state values the same way by just doing curly braces and then referencing the state value name like that. And we'll say you are logging in as this person. And then as we change the state value, this is why the controlled input is valuable, because now as it changes, we get a component refresh. So anytime that state changes or any of the properties change that a component is using, it will cause a refresh. That's how React determines when to change what's on the page, is when the state values change or the props change. So as we come over here, it's empty, you're logging as this. And then as I change this, so if this wasn't a controlled input, we couldn't do something like this, right? That's how we get that live change. And again, this is something that you could do with the vanilla DOM, like the stuff we did before, where you're just tracking this and calling like an updater, but React is doing that optimized. So. All right. Y'all stop me if you have a question. I'm just going to keep going. We're going to set up a conditional render. A conditional render is essentially before any return statement, you just write an if statement. Remember, we're just doing JavaScript. It's got a bunch of extra stuff going on, but it is just JavaScript. So it can do an if statement, something like this. If, you know, if username's equal to whatever we want to do. Okay, we're going to make another state value called loaded, initialized as false. And in the if statement, say if loaded is true, return something. If it's not, we'll say that we're loading. Check the browser. All right, cool. So we're going to have const loaded and then set loaded equals use state. And then we're going to
Loaded and set
initialize.
loaded is misspelled, by the way.
Thanks, man. Set loaded and then initialize loaded as false. Then we're going to drag that down and come down here and say if loaded. Remember that essentially equates to if loaded is true. So if loaded, you know, you could do if you want to, but this means the same thing. So if loaded is true, we want to return all the stuff that we have already like that. So now my return for what this outputs, the HTML it outputs, is tied up behind a conditional. Else we want to return something else. In this case, we'll just do a H1. Okay, that's not working. That says website loading. All right, so now we'll never see, I have no way in my application of toggling the state value to true. So we're never going to be able to see our actual website because we have no way of changing this. So does at least this conditional part, does that make sense for everybody? Just hide it behind an if statement, right? Nothing too crazy. Any thoughts, concerns? Okay. Cool. False. All right, now we're going to go in and add a button below that sets that. All right, add a button below your website loading header in the conditional. Add an on-click prop to the button that will toggle the state of loaded from false to true. Check the browser to confirm. So we're just going to, we're going to put a button down here. In this case, we'll use a fragment because we can't have sibling elements. Or we'll call this, we'll say the button load website. And then we're going to add an on-click property to this. And you guys do tell me if Luke did this differently. I don't want to be doing stuff super different from how he did it. On-click that calls set loaded and just passes true inside. Cool. So when we click the button, it sets loaded to true. Since loaded is a state value, it reassesses what should be returned from this app component altogether and says, okay, now loaded is true, so we'll return the website. So come back over here. If I hit this, look at the website. Because state value changing forces the whole app or the whole component to re-render. So that's why in React's like documentation, they recommend keeping components very simple so that one, they're more flexible in how you can use them. And then two, so that you're not re-rendering like whole large sections of a page, but just only the smallest amount that you have to. That is a conditional with an updater function.
I have a slightly, it's not really a question, but more just like I did like the if statement basically backwards. Like instead of if loaded return, I did if loaded equals false, give the bottom part, and then else the top part. Does that matter, or is that just like kind of like for readability?
That's just make it the most readable.
Okay, so the way you have it is like the most proper for readability.
I would think so, just because it's easier to know what this is doing.
Mhm.
I can just easily look up, say like, this is just a, true false value. And then, okay, if this is true or false, just do that. If I do the exclamation point, you have to take that second and like assess like, okay, what is this saying?
I mean, well, I set it equal to false. The exclamation just means it's not what's in the conditional, right?
Right. It's the opposite of whatever it is. Yeah. You know what I'm saying though.
Yeah. Okay. I'll probably just format it like yours then.
Whenever I think like the most recommendations that I've got is just to make it, don't worry about it being like the fastest. If it's just a fraction of a, if it's negligible, the performance difference, you should optimize it to be the most readable and easier to understand. So that's a good way to think of it. Like someone's going to have to come back and look at this, and maintain it. So I don't know. You can't do it every time, but you need to try and focus on things being like understandable when someone has to look through it. All right, cool. Oh, we're almost done. All right, so the next, oftentimes it is me and I can't understand it. So a lot of the stuff I look back over, I'm like, why did I do all this way? This is terrible. And I've made problems for myself. So this thing up here, this use state, this is called a hook. Another hook that we're going to be using is called use effect. There's many hooks, but these are the most common ones as far as I understand it. So if use state initializes a state value and provides an updater function for it, a use effect gives you the ability to run side effects. So say when username changes, I want to call to my database and update that. I can put that in a use effect because the way that they've designed it is they consider like you have side effect operations or things that you want to do whenever a state value changes. That's what use effect is for. We'll put the use effect up here like that. I think there's actually an autocomplete for this as well. I thought, nah, there's not. Lame. Use effect takes 2 arguments. So I call use effect, provide it a function to run like that. The second argument is whatever state values you want this side effect function to run on. So if I wanted to tie it to username, I could pass the state value username in there. If I leave it empty like this, this will only run when the page loads. If I pass username inside, it will run when the page loads or whenever this component is mounted and whenever username changes. So I know this is a wall of information, but just try and remember that. So what we wanted, I'm sorry, somebody have a question?
I was just say if it's not there, I don't know if this is like the correct thing. Could you do it like how I did with the JSON settings for like an Emmet abbreviation? Could you create a JSON setting to create that sort of base boilerplate? Is that possible?
I wouldn't be surprised if you could. I haven't ever tried that, but that's a good idea. Yeah, probably.
Yeah, the
VS
problem
Code's pretty flexible. So
the problem I had with the JSON settings was I found I had to like literally move the actual file of the .json to where I'm at, and I don't know how to like just put that in my general VS Code settings. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you'd have to like recreate
it's like a per
it.
project thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's like something that's useful or like maybe could become tedious if you'd have to like recreate it or redrag it into a new project folder or not.
Yeah. I don't know. It probably would get frustrating. Yeah, you probably want to figure out a way to do it through VS Code, but you probably could.
Okay.
Note always, if you're going to default to something, always leave just like, don't ever write an effect like this. If you do this, then this use effect is going to keep running forever, like over and over again. You need to put the array there to tell it to only run the one time. Oftentimes you'll only want to run an effect like when a component loads. So we'll use this use effect for like fetching data whenever app loads or something like that, like a list of, posts from the user or something, you know, we'll do it inside of this and use the empty array so that it loads once. What do they want us to do? This changes to the loading state using the empty array. We'll set a timer after 3 seconds. Yeah. Okay, so they want us to kind of mimic like loading data. We're going to wait 3 seconds in here. So we'll do a set timeout. We're going to wait for 3 seconds and set loaded in here. And I can just say to true. Alrighty. So instead of clicking the button, if I don't click the button after 3 seconds, because this runs immediately. And we'll say only once. We'll say. We're throwing lots of stuff at you guys in this one, but I think we'll be better off. Once we get to the end, it'll all make more sense. Like we keep doing labs like this because they're throwing you everything like state values, use effects, updaters, and controlled inputs. But we'll keep using all this stuff over and over again for the next like 2 or 3 labs. So by the end of that, that'll start tying together. Cool. So now if we reload the page, we have a use effect that runs. So app is mounted. 1, 2, 3. There we go. Cool. Yeah, I don't know. We've gone over a lot. Any questions on the use effect?
Yes, and it may be because it's nothing changing it back to false, but I don't have the array or what are the 2 brackets at the end of the use effect function. And it works. It doesn't change the page back. Like I said, maybe because there's nothing setting it back, but
you're not toggling it.
Right. And so that empty array or whatever you want to call it is that empty one just runs it once.
Right.
Where if you were put username, every time username changed, it would run.
Let's do like 1 second. If I don't put that, it keeps running it over and over again.
No, it's not doing that.
Because you're just setting it to true. See how I changed this? So if it's already true, it's just resetting it. It's like there's nothing to change. But because we're toggling it back and forth, this use effect is running over and over again. Now imagine instead of just setting a state value, this was like fetching data. You're like fetching like as fast as it can do it. And it'll block up the entire page, you know.
But like I said, if you put username in those brackets, it's running every time you change the username or there's a
right. So yeah, the way that works is it runs. So empty array runs once on the component, whenever the component is loaded. And then whatever things I put in here, it'll run an extra time if this changes. So like if I had like an edit username feature and they go in and type in edit username and they hit submit, the submit button I can tie to like username has changed or say if as they type or something, you know. It's handy to know this. You can do a lot of cool stuff when you know that a use effect will run whenever I change the state value. You can start doing some more cool stuff using React. Cool. So that would be empty and that would just be true because I just want to do it once. So based on y'all's confidence level and how we've talked, I mean, I think this has been a much better first React lab. So props to Luke. If it's not making sense yet, we're going to keep doing this. So don't worry, it's going to come together. But did you guys have any other questions before I let you go?
I did actually have one question about the declaring event handlers. Is there a particular reason that you're using function expressions for declaring those? Because my understanding is that function expressions aren't hoisted, so you essentially have to put those before the content. Whereas if you use a old style function declaration, you could put it below the place where you're declaring your component, and it will be hoisted above it.
That's very
I was
true.
wondering if there's a particular reason.
I think it's just because I don't like mixing ES6 and ES5 functions. That's why I don't do
Okay.
it.
Well, I noticed both you and both you and Luke were doing that.
Dude, if the question is why do I do something and Luke does it, I do it because Luke does it half the time. I'm usually not so opinionated, but I would keep doing that just because the ES5, ES6 thing.
I mean, yes, it's not that much of an issue if you only have like a couple of event handlers and each of them are only like a line too long. But if you have a dozen or so,
right,
that could
it can get pretty.
that could clutter up your component if you're just trying to look at what a constant or at the constant the component is actually going to render.
Fair, but also when you do like a function keyword or whatever, that's multi-line, so maybe that also, I don't know, it's preference.
Okay,
Most
thank you
examples, YouTube tutorials.
for the explanation.
Yeah, no problem, man. Any more questions, guys?
I think I have a question. So I'm kind of getting lost in when we try to get the terminology right. So the hooks. I'm getting lost in the difference between like when we want to use a hook and when we want to reference like something from a JSX and the components. Like, what's the difference between those basically?
I'd say the point of the hooks is to tie in React functionality to into your component. So I want to use state values. React is about state. I want to run a side effect whenever a state value changes or props change. You use an effect. You can also write custom hooks, like add on the functionality of what React can do. We're not going to get into writing custom hooks, but use state and use effect. So those are very specific cases. They are just, like if I'm just saying I want to run a side effect, this could be anything in here. But if I want to do it when the state value changes, so it's really just understanding what these do or when they run, that you would understand the hooks. And then you said the difference between like those and something like this.
Like the greeter.jsx components, like the difference between those, where it's like
between like this whole
the props. Like, 'cause it seems, I guess my brain's not smart enough to know the difference right now.
No, dude, it's just takes time. The props, it's really just understanding the React system, how React has state values, and when those state values change, it updates the page. And then understanding like a state value that I want to pass to another child component, meaning like app is the parent and it renders greeter. So app is the parent and greeter is the child. I can pass down props like this. Like if what you'll see a lot is something like this, where I would pass down, instead of name is just a string, I could say name is the username state value. So now I'm passing down a state value of app as a prop into greeter, right? And it's going to get the same thing, but as greeter changes, we're getting the same thing, and now I'm updating based on a prop value. So, it's understanding the kind of React system, state values, properties.
So they all kind of work together, not necessarily
totally
against each other.
Totally. It's all about working, using them together. Yeah. And there's lots more hooks that you can look into. But those are kind of more complicated. Use effect and use state are the meat and potatoes.
Josh, at some point, could we get you to run through like one of the like the tic-tac-toe or the dicey business lab, but using
Hell
React?
no.
No?
No.
I think that would be so nice.
Yeah, that's a good challenge. It'd take a while, but it's the kind of thing, especially building it. You threw me a game too, doing the game in React. I think they have an example.
I guess like anything we've done prior to this lab wise, but watching you do it with React would
That's a
be
good
like a lot of clarity. I don't know if it's possible to set something like that up, but I don't know.
Let me look
if
back through
that's
the labs
possible.
and
Yeah.
find the one that's easiest.
Yeah.
the-
And we
the
could always
DOM
like just do that instead of Code Wars, So
ML drills.
The DOM stuff would be really difficult to
Josh, can
to
you do the
translate.
can you do the
I wanna see him do
setting up
just my
commander
type.
section?
Oh, hey,
Just
Josh,
my type with React.
I had a question. So when I was doing this on line 13 in that open array, we did pass in the loaded there. Is there a reason that you did not?
I don't know, because this I don't want this effect to run when loaded changes. I want this effect to change loaded. Does that make sense?
Okay.
I mean, it's
think I-
kind of moot for this example because loaded is only ever going to change once, but
Right.
Yeah, I think I just.
I do get what you're saying.
Because I did, well, no, I did set loaded true, and then I passed in has loaded there so that it would flip after 3 seconds, right? So I just was confused if there's a difference in the logic behind
Yeah.
without it being there.
Think about this effect. This effect's purpose is to change that state value. It's not to run a side effect. Remember, use effect is like it's about side effects. Like when loaded changes, do you want to do something else? Then you would put loaded in here.
Okay,
Because
gotcha.
when loaded changes, I want to do something else. I don't want it to change loaded. Does that make sense?
Okay. I just want to make sure I was telling them right because I had it on there for some reason.
Haley, I told people wrong for like 4 cohorts. They all got jobs. They're fine. All right.
And I told Reed I would ask you about that, and you did not put it in there, so I was kind of confused. Okay.
Now I'm just more confused. So
Yeah, me too. It's fine.
Listen to my words.
It doesn't affect the but putting it in there did not affect the functionality.
It won't affect it.
Okay.
You won't get any visual difference because it's doing, or loaded's not going to change again, you know?
Yeah, because it's just that one time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. That was it.
Any more cues? No? Alrighty. Next lab was what? What's the next one? Chirper.
Chirper.
You're going to make a little Twitter clone. It's pretty fun. I think I gave you guys a little bit of time on that one. So yeah. Oh yeah, we're covering that one on Friday. So hope y'all are working on that one. Any more questions or anything we want to fix? We're in the coworking space till lunch. So yeah. Y'all have a beautiful day. We'll see you in the afternoon for check-in.
Thank you, Josh. That was
Thanks for the walkthrough.
You did take attendance, right?